Hello and welcome to Apologetics 101. I'm your host, Brian, your resident Christian apologist. And today we are going to be responding to Dr. Joel Duff, who has a YouTube channel called Dr. Joel Duff. I'm not entirely certain what his academic credentials are. You look on his YouTube channel, you don't see anything that at least not the last time I checked on it, I see anything that would identify his academic background. So I'm not entirely certain. Some of y'all might know, so drop a comment below if you can tell me what his academic credentials are. I'm not exactly sure. But he does speak out against young Earth creationists. He is an evolutionist. That much I know. And I did a video recently where I sat there and interviewed Dr. Carl Werner on living fossils. Well, Dr. Joel Duff ended up replying in the comment section, and me and him had some back and forth debate going on for a little bit, and then he decided to do a response video to my video. Now, if you've been on this channel long enough, you know that I at least had three critics that I know of that has responded to me. The first one was Erica from Gutsy Gibbon. The second was uh, the Glenn Williamson from Ruhiff, and both of them concerning the situation involving Tompkins and his study. And the third one now is Dr. Joe Duff. And so he's the third critic to respond to me. He used a single clip. Now, I'm going to be showing here in a little bit the entire video of Dr. Joel Duff. I have his permission to do this. I know that goes beyond fair use, so that's why I got his permission. So I do have his permission to do that. So if he gets mad or whatever, for whatever I said, it doesn't matter because he did give me permission to do the entire video, to play the entire video. But I did ask him if it was okay with him. He said yes. So I got his permission to do the entire video. But I'm also going to be adding some other stuff because Dr. Carl Werner, who I gave the link to someone who responded to him in the video, saw his video, reviewed it, and he's giving me a lots and lots of notes on things that he actually said and proven something to help us. And here's an interesting little tidbit of information. There is a channeler named Danzel. I think his name is Danzel Senior because it's got SR at the end of his name. So it's like Danzel, capital S, lowercase r, no spaces. Um, and so it makes me think his name is Danzel Senior, but everybody calls him Denzel. And he is not a YouTuber. He has a channel on the other platform, Rumble, and that platform he is planning on making a response video also to Dr. Joel Duff, who responded to my Carl Werner video. He's going to be responding to him as well. Now, Dr. Carl Werner, since he knew both of us were going to do a response video, sends the same material to both of us. Um, Obviously, we can reword it or work it into our discussion any way we want to work it. Um, so I don't know. I haven't seen his video yet. I don't think he's got the video out yet. I'm hoping he does. I will probably be watching. I'll definitely probably be watching that to see how he responds to some of the how he critiques some of the arguments that Joel Duff makes. Maybe he will. Maybe if my video comes out before his, maybe he'll discuss that as well. So we'll see. But some interesting developments here. On the third time going through it, I actually caught Dr. Joel Duff in a. I don't like accusing people of lying, but intentional straw man arguments are equivalent to deception. Now, usually, a straw man argument is simply a misrepresentation of someone's position. Now, the vast majority of strawman arguments, like almost all of them, exception of a handful, are going to be unintentional. Because let's face it, we're going to have misunderstandings. It's easier to understand our position than it is to understand someone else's position. And so that happens. Sometimes there's vagueness on the other side of not communicating their position very well and things of that nature. That's why I try to be as precise as possible. But in this case, we're not dealing with an unintentional straw man. We're dealing with someone who intentionally strawmans Dr. Carl Werner. And I caught it on camera. I couldn't believe that I didn't see this the first couple of times going through it. But after reviewing the information that Dr. Carl Werner had, put it in clips. I put the slide is going to be the first reply that Dr. Duff had made to me when he first started a conversation, and so that's in there, and of course I started noticing these things when I was going through the video the third time, and I realized, oh wow, I can't believe I didn't catch this. Um, but I think that Dr. Joel Duff, on purpose, strawmanned, misrepresented, intentionally misrepresented Dr. Carl Werner's position. And we're going to see that as we go through that. I know that's a tall order. Say, okay, wow, that is a strong claim there, Brian. Can you back it up? Well, the interesting thing is, I'm going to back it up with video. You're going to find, I'm going to do a presentation first, show you what Dr. Carl Williams' position was, show you what my arguments were, and we're going to go from there to watching the video. The video is only 33 minutes long, but of course I'll be stopping it at different points. And so roughly I'd say this video shouldn't be over 2 hours. It may not even be an hour, but we'll see. All right, so let's jump in and have some fun. All right, so like I said before, we are responding to Dr. Joel Duff, and let's uh, let's go ahead and jump into this because I want to show you the slides and stuff too. But before I do all that, I want to sit there and clarify the positions that everyone has. Okay, Dr. Carl Werner has a position where he does an experiment. He goes around and he looks at all of these fossils and he takes pictures of them, right? Takes pictures of them and he does a side by side comparison. Now, he went to a lot of museums, like all over the world, I think. Um, but in the process of that, there were times when he was actually denied access to the fossils. Well, if he doesn't have access to fossils, he can't take a picture of them and he can't do a side by side comparison. As far as I know, nobody else has done a side by side comparison either. And so it's strange that the museums would not allow you to do that. It's weird. You think that they would. I mean, it was just a simple, you photograph, you can, supervise if you want to, and watch the whole process. It should be just as easy as just allowing them to have the fossil and doing a side by side comparison. But unfortunately, some of them didn't want that. And so one of the conversations was over the beaver, the situation with the beaver. And so and that's one of the ones that Dr. Carl Werner was not allowed to actually see and take a picture of the fossil. And so because he was not allowed to do this, what he's done is he's relied on what evolutionists themselves have said about the fossil find. He used terms like beaver-like and similar characteristics as a beaver. So he can't say that it's a modern beaver per se until someone can do a side by side comparison. As far as I know, nobody else has done that either. So it's not just Carl Werner that has not been able to do it. Nobody else has either. And so until someone does a side by side comparison, there's no way to know for sure whether it is a modern beaver or not. So what Carl Werner has done is he's going with what evolutionists themselves have said and said at the very least it is beaver-like. It's beaverish looking in terms of some of the similarities that are clearly there. Now, whether it is a beaver or not, we can't say that for sure 100% without doing a side-by-side comparison. Now, what I said in the thing is that the fossils that he was allowed to see, I said it looked exactly alike. What I meant by that is that when you compare a side by side comparison, like in case of the Nautilus, we're going to talk about that today as well. But the Nautilus, it's like a type of mollusk shell, and there was I guess a museum that had the fossils took in half, and so of course we can do that same thing with a Nautilus as well, to take it in half, and we could see the inside, the fossil, see the inside of the Nautilus, and we could actually be able to do a side by side and say, yep, that's Nautilus. It looks exactly alike, and it does. And others like possum-like animals are very similar. It's hard to say for sure unless you get all the different types of possums together and look at that. I was reading that in Carl Werner's book on living fossils, and but it's similar. You can at least look at the image and look at the fossil and tell there's similarities there. Um, now, um, uh, Now, of course, he kind of strawmans me on that and says that Brian said that they uh, um, were exactly the same. No, I said they look exactly the same. We'll get into that later too, because I actually have a Word document which has all of our replies in it, at least up until he made that video. I didn't do any of the replies that we did after he made that video. But that's not relevant because it's mostly relevant before he made the video, so I can point out the fact that I did say that before he made the video. And you can see all the different times I said looks exactly, looks exactly, looks exactly over and over again. So he actually misrepresented what I said as well. I didn't say they were exactly the same in that respect. Or I said look exactly. That means visibly, physically, from the point of view of looking, if you have the side by side comparison, you got the fossil and you have the actual living animal, then you can make that comparison side by side. And so that's what I was getting at. I wasn't getting at that it were the same because in some cases I think that it probably is. But what Carl Werner's done, he's saying, okay, even though we may suspect that it is the modern beaver or the modern whatever, uh, on certain ones, I wasn't allowed to see the fossils, so we can't do a side by side comparison. And so he's saying, all right, because of that, I'm going with what the evolutionists say. There's no way to confirm that it was the same as the modern beaver, but it could be the same kind as a beaver or just similar to a beaver, whatever the case may be. But the evolutionists themselves are making that argument that it's beaver-like, that it has similar characteristics and things like that. They are making it. And so he's working off of their admission and what they're willing to say about this particular find. That's what he's saying. And you will hear uh, Dr. Joe Duff misrepresent his position in the video. But before he does that, we need to clarify exactly what his position is. And I'm going to be utilizing the email that he sent to me as well as his book, which I have right here beside me, Living Fossils. Okay, we're going to be using that, and we're going to be using the slides, and the slides are going to be based on the book and the email that he given me, and certain responses that I also have as well. So we're going to chew through that, and then after that, we're going to watch this 33-minute video, and during that time, we're going to be discussing it. And so we're going to be looking into Dr. Joel Duff's arguments here, and you're going to notice on camera he's going to misrepresent uh, uh, Dr. Carl Werner, but he's going to do it on purpose. I don't use the word lie. Very easy. But in a strawman argument, they say it's easy to attack a strawman. It is to attack position, but an intentional An intentional straw man argument is deliberate deception because you are on purpose misrepresenting that person's position. You're not doing it because you just don't understand it. You're misunderstanding it, or you're misrepresenting it because you're doing it intentional with the intent to deceive others. That is a huge issue. And yes, I realize that's a bold claim for me to make. I don't normally make it. I don't take it lightly to accuse another person of deception. Evolutionists do that to us all the time because they disagree with us. And I don't ever want to sit there and say, hey, I think you're wrong, therefore you must be lying. I don't ever want to make that kind of conclusion because I know how bad that conclusion would be. But in this case, we have reasons to suspect that he is lying. And you're going to see this in the video. All right. Without further ado, let me dive into my slides. All right, we're going to start here. Dr. Carl Werner's defense against Dr. Joel Duff. And we're going to start with talking about reclassifying the animals according to modern evolutionists. This was one of the arguments that, one of the major arguments that Dr. Joel Duff had in his video. Not related to a straw man exactly, but what he's done is he has tried to rely on modern classification of these animals to argue that they must be different, not related, not or even possibly even not similar to each other as a result of how they are being classified by modern evolutionists. And so we're going to jump into that. If you've seen my channel long enough, you know that as a personal pet peeve of mine, is when people will sit there and try to treat the modern classification system as if it's a universal fact, as if it's a fact for all time. And it's not. We didn't invent the way, or we didn't discover the way these things ought to be classified. We invented it. We personally chose to group them this way. And one of the major ways to realize this is when you see the fact that the modern classification system, what is usually referred to as the linear classification system, is constantly in flux. It's always changing, always. And that becomes very, very clear. And you're going to see that as well as we discuss this. So Dr. Carl Werner has some stuff to say on that as well. I'm going to be paraphrasing him a little bit here. But changing the name of an animal doesn't mean it's the same quote-unquote species to begin with. For example, Dr. Carl Werner offers examples of this in the 4th volume of his book series, The Grand Experiment, Volume 4, Human Evolution, on page 43. He gives 9 categories of overturned ape men, and he gives me many examples of different names for Neanderthals, such as Homo neanderthalensis, 1864, Homo calificus. Oh, by the way, just so you know, Latin is not my language, so I'll probably likely butcher a lot of these names. But critics have a bad habit of, if you don't pronounce names right, they jump on it as if that has anything to do with your arguments or anything to do with your knowledge on these things. It doesn't. It has to do with whether or not you can pronounce certain words. And a lot of these words are in Latin. That Latin is not a language I've studied. So I probably likely will butcher a lot of these names. It doesn't mean I don't know what I'm talking about. It doesn't have anything to do with the arguments I present today. But critics like to pounce on that, so I figure I might as well get that out of the way. Yes, I know I might end up butchering these names. Homo gibraltarensis, 1869, etc., in which he also offers several of them with different genus names. Genus is the classification in the modern classification system. Genus is the classification right above species. Genus names, which he included to me in green, and so I included here in green. Homo was a genus Prototanthropus, Thomo, etc. Thomo, I guess it's pronounced, I don't know, etc., which I left in green. And furthermore, Dr. Werner offers this as evidence that evolutionists cannot be trusted with naming these names. All these in reality were one species, namely Neanderthals. Additionally, Brian Apologetics 101, so this is not from Carl's email, would add that even the word quote unquote species is a heavily debated term among evolutionists. Evolutionists are constantly in flux when it comes to the modern classification system. The classification system itself is in flux, is what I meant. Um, Oftentimes, regrouping, renaming, adding, subtracting, and reshuffling various groups around within the modern classification system, which shows it's not universal, which is demonstrated that the various groups around them within modern classification, which is demonstrates that the modern classification system is constantly in flux. I agree with Dr. Werner here. We cannot trust how modern evolutionists are grouping and regrouping these animals here. In addition to these things, okay, this is again, this is same thing on reclassification. In addition to these things, Dr. Werner gives me 47 unique species names for Homo erectus, which also had reassigned 17 different genus names to these groups. Again, the genus name will be in green. Again, sorry if I butcher it. And you'll see the green, the green words right here. These are the genuses, okay? Uh, and it says Apothecanthropus erectus, 1893, Anthropopithecus, Thecus, I can't pronounce that, erectus, sorry about that, Homo javanesis, Primogenesis, Homo Pathecanthropus, Halobates, Betis, Gigantus, 1899, Proanthropus erectus, 1900, Pithecanthropus dubosi, 1901, Halobates Gigas, I guess it's pronounced, 1909. And then they got several others. You can see these in green. I did these in a different shade of green. I was kind of copying and pasting over here, but these I kind of had to write them in, and I had to use the green that I had available. So there's a little brighter, so I can't really see them very well. Um, uh, I do see this one right here, though. This one right here I can pronounce, Australopithecus. That is I know that one because I actually studied Australopithecus before. Um, Paleo Javanicus, and then of course the others. And to name but a few here, all of these are from page 160 of Dr. Werner's book, The Grand Experiment, Volume 4, Human Evolution. Now, as a disclaimer, I put down here I had not personally read that book, Volume 4. I only got the first two volumes. I can show it here. I got the first two volumes of Dr. Werner's books. I guess those were the only two that was out at the time I originally got it. I got those a while back. And so I'm guessing he probably didn't have the other three books out yet. Now he does, and now I have to get those eventually. But I didn't. I don't actually have Volume 4. But I am basing it off of what Dr. Carl Werner had said about the book, and obviously compare notes if you got the book yourself. All right. Dr. Werner Dr. Werner identified that the Nautilus, I'm going to show you a picture in a second, shell looked exactly alike when cut open. Pages 84 through 85 from email exchange with Dr. Carl Werner. he said here, I placed a modern shell, in parentheses, cut in half, next to the fossil. This is from his book. Since I do have that book, I am quoting directly from that book. I could now see the inside of both. Note that the tube-like symfuncle, if that's how you pronounce that, is well preserved in the fossil and cuts through the center of each chamber. In the modern nautilus shell, the soft-tissued siphuncle and other fleshly parts have been removed, but can be inferred by the indentions in the wall of each chamber. And he said that the modern is Nautilus pumpalis, the dinosaur era fossil Sinoceras linatus, from email exchange with Dr. Carl Werner. All right, I'm going to show you this. All right, here it is right here. And you can see the picture. See the fossil, and you can see it cut in half. It's exactly like a nautilus shell is supposed to be. Right here, you can see the indentions. This is where the fleshly part is supposed to be. They did take out the fleshly part here on the real deal, on the modern version, but you can see where the indentions are. So that's what he was talking about there, and I quoted from that page as well. And let's look at what else he said on that, because there was a skeptic that thought it was something different than what it actually was. All right. He then identifies, in response to a critic replying to Dr. Duff's video, had claimed that these were ammonites, but not knowledge shells. Dr. Werner, however, said that this was incorrect. He said that this is what the museum themselves as not identified as knowledge shells. Okay, and if you look at there's a citation I've got from a Academy of Science, I think it is. I think that was what it is. California Academy of Science, I think it was. The chambered Nautilus, Nautilus pumpalis, has been around for 500 million years, this is according to their presupposition, and changed little during that time. Two facts that often earn it the name label living fossil. All right. Let me show you a picture here. Okay. All right. That is example of a Mennonites. It's not a nautilus shell. Nautilus shell is this, and you can see the difference here, right? And again, if you look at the picture in the book, it's identical. So so when I say it looks exactly the same, it did. It looked exactly the same. All right. So let's move forward. Now, just to be clear, I cited him here specifically, so that way there is no confusion. I don't have Dr. Duff trying to accuse me of misrepresenting Carl Werner's argument. I don't have, and there's no misunderstanding with Dr. Duff about what he is actually arguing. So I want to make sure to get everything perfectly right. So what I've done is I'm quoting him verbatim, and so that's what I'm doing. This is Dr. Werner's argument. He expressed this through the email. This is verbatim, so I'm quoting him here. This is what he said. Continuing in this thought, if all of these Neanderthals, Homo erectus, and Nautilus shells were misidentified as different species and different genus groups, then likely most, not all, and he puts not all there, most and not all are in all caps to emphasize this, most, not all, of the 100 dinosaur era living fossils identified in my book, Living Fossils, by a side-by-side comparisons are the same species. So you understood that, right? That shells were misidentified as different species and different genus groups, then most likely most, not all, of the 100 dinosaur era living fossils identified in my book, living fossils, via side by side comparison. So he's talking about the ones he's actually able to do side by side comparisons. And even then, he's not saying universally, he's saying most of them are the same species as a result. Okay? There's no misunderstanding that statement. All right. Likely, they had been misnamed by the evolutionist scientists wanting to make a name for themselves and saying they found completely new genus or species of some animal from email exchange with Dr. Carl Werner. So essentially, he's not arguing that every animal that they found mammal wise is a living or is a modern fossil, okay, or a modern animal. Um, the ones that he did do side by side comparisons to, he is arguing that most of them, even if not all of them, but most of them are likely to be um, misidentified as a result. Now, some of them might not be, but most of them, the I don't know if I would be right to say the vast majority or not. So I'm just going to go with what Dr. Werner said. Most, not all, of the 100 dinosaur era living fossils identified in my book, Living Fossils via side by side comparisons, are the same species. That they've just been misidentified by the modern evolutionists. Now, the interesting thing is there's always some evolutionists because most my experience with evolutionists is not good. Most of them do tend to be dishonest. I don't think all of them are. I have come across some honest evolutionists. I have done that, and I've applauded them for their honesty and integrity, despite the fact that they're evolutionists and they might have a particular worldview that allows them to be dishonest if they want to, etc. They decide to go the route of honesty, and so I always appreciate that when I run into an honest evolutionist, but it doesn't happen very often. Most of them tend to be very misleading, very deceptive, very word twisting, etc. It's very difficult to find an evolutionist that's willing to be honest, and so I expect that despite all the caps that Dr. Werner has put in this slide here, despite all the emphasis that Dr. Werner has made, despite the fact that I went through it twice, there's going to be some critic somewhere that's going to misrepresent what he just said, despite all of that. Yeah, unfortunately. But let's move forward. I got cute pictures of dogs there, but uh, it's okay. That's pretty cool. Variations within species does not mean that it is a different species. There are lots of variations in dogs, and the skulls of dogs, this is what was brought up to me by Carl Werner, skulls of dogs, which differ considerably from each other, but no one doubts that they're the same species. In fact, there could be potentially hundreds of breeds of dogs with considerable variations, but yet they're all the same species, alluding to Dr. Werner's The Grand Design Living Fossil, pages 19 through 25. Those are the pages that Dr. Werner gave me, and he does talk about the variations within that. So you can have differences between dogs, right? And you got different breeds of dogs, right? But yet they're all considered the same species. And something else I found out a while back, but a wolf and a dog is actually considered the same species. A wolf and a dog is actually considered the same species. They're not different. They're actually considered the same species. But yet you can still have differences. Have you ever seen a half dog, half wolf? Man, gorgeous. But I'm a dog lover. I can't help it. I know some of y'all might be cat lovers. And I don't mind cats either. I've had one cat my entire life. But I grew up around dogs, and so I'm used to dogs, and so I like dogs. But you get variations even within lots and lots of different dog breeds. I mean, there's hundreds. I think I've heard there's like 300, 500. I can't remember how many dog breeds presently in the world today, but there's a lot. There's hundreds of dog breeds, but they're all the same species. Lots of different variations. I could have shown lots and lots of other images that I found on dog breed. You see my link for my images, by the way, right here. Um, but I could have shown lots and lots of different images for dogs because they differ widely, but yet they are considered to be the same species. And that's the point that Carl Werner is making here, is that they're the same species despite those differences. So there's always the possibility they could have some differences and still be the same species. Okay, now we're going to move into discussing the beaver thing, because the beaver thing was something that Dr. Joel Duff made a big deal about, both in his comments to me as well as in his video. So we're going to hear Dr. Werner talk about that as well, or at least I'm going to talk about it, but it's going to express what he said in the email. All right, so let's talk about discussion on the beaver. Dr. Joel Duff's comment to me. This is the first comment that Dr. Joel dropped in the thing. We had lots and lots of back and forth since then, including a couple since he made his video as well. But Dr. Joel Duff, this is the first comment that Dr. Duff made to me. Okay, on my video on living fossils. You should have asked him about beavers being found with dinosaurs. You allowed him to make this claim without calling him out on that lie. It's not a lie. That he has been telling for 10 years. Okay? Of course, what is he talking about with beavers? Well, he thinks that Carl Werner has argued for the past 10 years. He'll say this in this comment. But he thinks Carl Werner argued for the past 10 years that they were beaver. And only in this video he says beaver-like. That is false. I even got, you'll see here in a little bit, some citation of Dr. Carl Werner actually referencing it, and he does reference it as beaver-like. In his book, he does reference it as beaver-like in his presentation, and that's what he's been echoing for the last 10 years. He's never said it definitely was a beaver. He's never said that. But, of course, Dr. Joel Duff has accused him of doing that. All right. Now, understand something. He also knows that he did say beaver-like in the video. Just keep that in mind. It will be important later. All right. He goes further. He says, this time he did say a beaver-like animal has been found with dinosaurs, as he was listing several modern mammals that have been found with dinosaurs, but that animal was not a beaver and not related to modern beavers. And even AIG agrees that it was an extinct, separate kind of animal, unrelated to any living group of mammals. Now, at this point, Dr. Duff needs to add a source. He can't just simply say AIG agrees with him. I've heard critics like Guts and Gibbon will do that a lot of times. Will say AIG even agrees with me and never source the statement. Of course, lots of people write on AIG's website or ARJ, the peer-reviewed publication by Answers in Genesis, but their positions are not necessarily representative of AIG's per se. So, but I would have to see the source too, because critics have never really fully understood our arguments. They usually take us out of context. They usually misrepresent what we're actually saying. They usually only take snippets, and then they miss a whole bunch of other stuff that we said, and they don't fully understand the point of our arguments or whatnot. And so I would have to see the reference to AIG's website to be convinced that this is the case. But he doesn't provide any reference here. He doesn't provide any reference in any of the comments. He also doesn't provide any reference in his video toward the Answers in Genesis claim. He never provides a source for this. So it's interesting that no source has been provided at all for the alleged claim that Answers in Genesis agrees with him. Same is true of the squirrel and possum that he lists. Now, he does do a side-by-side of the possum. It's in his book, and it does show similarities. He has had 10 years to read the original research and correct these errors. Now, of course, what he's talking about is having to go with what they reclassify. And we just got through talking about showing that there's no point in doing that because they can't be trusted on how they're classifying these things because they're just making stuff up, regrouping things, changing things around. It's constantly in flux. So just because they claim it's the same species or different species or another genus or whatever the case may be, doesn't make it so. All right. You say 10 years to correct this original research and correct these errors because he thinks that he's making those errors. Last 10 years, he didn't make any errors, but continues to persist in spreading factually inaccurate information. Okay, we'll see who's spreading factually inaccurate information there. All right. Dr. Werner's rebuttal to Dr. Duff's comment on this in his comments to me and his response to Dr. Duff's video. Now to the beaver-like mammal mentioned in my book on page 175, I never said it was a beaver. It was the evolution scientists who said it was a beaver. They were using the word tongue-in-cheek and did not believe it was a modern beaver. Now, in these articles, they did not say it was a modern beaver or even a beaver, but it looked like a beaver with a flat tail. In fact, if you look in the picture of a modern beaver below, it does look different than the picture of the dinosaur era beaver. Notice the flat tail from email exchange between me and Dr. Werner. Now, from here, I plan on showing you some links that I had found or that Dr. Carl Werner had dropped to show you, including what he's talking about with the image of the beaver. And I'll show you that now. All right, here is a beaver. Can spend 15 minutes underwater before coming up from air. You kind of can see the tail and the wet feet here. And so a beaver looks, and it looked very similar to a beaver. They think they might have had a webbed feet. The tail was identical, and Dr. Joel Duff will admit the tail is similar um, to a beaver's and so forth. And they think it had fur and that sort of thing. So it does look very similar to a beaver. Now I want you to see their references on this. It says here, the creature had had fur, a broad scaly tail, and webbed feet for swimming. It was about 42 centimeters in length and had seal-like teeth for eating fish. And it tells the name of it, and it says resembles a modern-day beaver. That's what they said, but belonged to a group that became extinct long before rodents appeared. So in other words, the writer is not going to claim it's a modern beaver, but they admit it. I mean, taking from that, it's almost like they're saying, well, yeah, it is very similar to a modern beaver, but it can't be a modern beaver because we reclassified it as a different group, which we think went extinct long before the existence of rodents. That's essentially what it said. What it. But yeah, that's the one that they also titles it a quote unquote Jurassic Beaver. All right, let's look at another one. All right, this one says titled Jurassic quote unquote Beaver is largest early mammal yet. A new fossil from China proves that the mammal that lived during the Jurassic era were more diverse than previously thought. This again is evolutionary presuppositions here. The 164 million year old creature dubbed Cata lustrosimilis had a tail like a beaver, the padding limbs of an otter, seal-like teeth, and probably webbed feet. And although most Jurassic mammals discovered thus far were tiny, shoe-like animals, C. lustrosimilis would have weighed in at approximately a pound, roughly the size of a small female platypus. It is the largest mammal from this time period on record. Um, but it does say they include impressions of soft tissue and fur, and this is actually, I think this is the earliest evidence we have of fur with the dinosaur there. So it's preserved nicely enough for us to know that the animal did have fur, just like a beaver. Um, just like a beaver doesn't necessarily make it a beaver, but it's just like a beaver. It says Jurassic Beaver finds stuns expert discovery of a new remarkable preserved fossil of a beaver-like mammal. They're saying beaver-like. Okay, they're using that term. They're using beaver-like. They're using Jurassic beaver. Again, they're being tongue-in-cheek, as Carl Warner mentioned. But they're the ones using the reference. They're the ones who's claiming that this is similar, very similar to what we now refer to as a modern beaver. They don't think that it is a modern beaver, but they do see there's definite similarities between them. A mammal that lived 164 million years ago is shaking paleontologists' understanding of early mammals. Looking at it was put together from pieces of platypus, river otter, and beaver. The creature was nearly half a meter long and weighed about a half a kilogram. This makes it the largest mammal ever found in the Jurassic period, from 200 million to 145 million years ago. The fossil of the semi-aquatic mammal, and gives the name, was discovered in the middle Jurassic and da da da. But the point is that they're the ones who's making this comparison. So they're actually making the comparison between similarities, and you heard the similarities, right? Webbed feet, the fur, the seal-like teeth for eating fish, the tail, very similar to a beaver, and so this thing's adapted for swimming in water. So you're looking at a lot of similarities here, and yeah, there are beaver-like similarities, very much so, and so that's what Carl Werner has argued for, and he has argued that for all 10 years that he's been doing this, or at least doing this from this book. He's been doing that the entire time. So Dr. Duff was wrong, is incorrect to argue that he has argued that it was a modern beaver, or that that they're saying that it was a modern beaver or anything like that, because none of that stuff is what Carl Werner has actually said. Let's continue the discussion in the slides. He is absolutely correct on this. Talking about Dr. Carl Werner, or I'm talking about Dr. Carl Werner. In his book, he writes, quote unquote, I'm quoting Carl Werner here, I will now detail mammals that have been found in dinosaur layers deemed by evolution scientists to be similar in outward appearance to the modern varieties, but not the same genus or species. In other words, they're not going to consider them the same species, but they'll at least say that it's possible that they could be the same genus or something similar. As of this writing, I cannot confidently say that any of these mammals are modern species, but when I look at the few available skeletons, they look similar. That's what he's arguing. Okay. He further wrote, I have presented the fossils of two modern appearing mammals, a ringtail opossum-like animal and a hedgehog-like animal. Besides these three were others such as Jurassic beaver from China, quote unquote, a dinosaur-eating Tasmanian devil-like Rhiponomus, a duck-billed platypus-like animal, and echidna-like animal. By the way, echidna, I come to find out, is the other mammal that lays eggs, other considered mammal that lays eggs. The first one that most people know about is the duck-billed platypus, but echidna, also known as the spiny anteater, is what it said online. Spiny anteater is actually the other mammal that can actually lay eggs. Echidna-like mammal, a shrew-like mammal, and various insectivore. I think those are animals that eat insects. Um, like the anteater is an insectivore, I believe. Uh, Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, because I'm not 100% certain of that, but I think that's what that means. Insectivore mammals. I cannot verify if any of these other dinosaur era mammals were truly similar to modern mammals, since I was unable to photograph these fossils. I never saw them on display. So, and this is from Carl Werner's book, The Grand Experiment, Volume 2, Living Fossils, pages 174 and 182. I have the book here with the pictures and everything. And that's what he said from that book, pages 174 and 182. The first quote is from 174, and the second is from 182. And so he actually says this in his book. So wait a minute. According to Dr. Duff, he's been telling this quote unquote lie for the past 10 years, but yet he said it in his book. So this is complete nonsense. This is completely wrong. It's like he did Dr. Duff even bother reading Carl Werner's book? I'm not sure. But either way, he clearly did not represent what he actually claimed. But this is going to become even more important when we get into the video, because in the video, he will sit there and Carl Werner will say beaver like in the video. He will deny this the moment Carl Werner gets done with the in the clip. When the clip is over, he will deny this. Then he will later shift from that to beaver. He will also claim that it was only the tail of a beaver, the tail of a beaver that that is similar, which is false, as we saw from uh, the sources and stuff. That's incorrect. There's more to it that's similar to a beaver. It's not just a tail. So yeah, when we go into this video, I want you to be able to see if you can catch this. Now, everybody here knows what his position is. Okay, we know what his position is. You know what my position is. And now let's uh, play the video and see if we can catch the mistakes that Dr. Joel Duff made in this video. All right.
Hey, it's Joel Duff. Welcome back to the channel. We have to talk about this mammals being found with dinosaurs claim once again. I say once again because a couple weeks ago, I made this video right here. Here's the cover slide of it. This Answers in Genesis lie needs to stop. And I used that word lie and I explained why I thought it was necessary to use such a strong word. And in that video, the gist of it was this. There's an Answers in Genesis speaker and others who have claimed that beavers, modern rabbits, modern hedgehogs, modern squirrels, modern flamingos, that fossils representing those modern organisms, right, that are just like those modern organisms, have been found alongside dinosaurs, implying that those animals lived right alongside the dinosaurs.
All right. Did you notice the first thing? What did Dr. Joel Duff say in his reply? The Answers in Genesis agree that it's not the same. But here he's saying, nope, Answers in Genesis are saying that it's the same. Well, which is it? Can't be both. That's what he said. And you saw the reply, the original reply that he made, and then he says that Answers in Genesis agrees with him. But yet, when we went to the video, he says, nope, I had to respond to Answers in Genesis because they don't agree with him. You guys caught that, right?
Now, this is just wrong. I mean, young earth creationists may wish to have their beliefs that those organisms were all created at the same time and they should be present along with dinosaurs, that they were present along with dinosaurs. But it's different to claim that you've actually found evidence to support your claim. And that's what's being claimed by Answers in Genesis, and specifically Carl Werner, who is who we're going to talk about today.
All right. I should probably say a few things on this also with what he said on lying, but I'll get to lying in a second. Um, all right. Okay. He says that that of course you noticed the mistake automatically. That we claim that he's saying that we're claiming that beavers and that sort of thing. Not all the animals are being claimed that way. Uh, Rather, instead, it's not being that like that at all. And he's saying that we're saying that, and we're getting this from Carl Werner. And he's saying Answers in Genesis is saying that, even though he basically contradicts himself in the uh, reply to me. He just completely contradicted himself on that. But in any case, he's saying that, and of course, he's also accusing Dr. Carl Werner of lying. It's also found in his video description. You can see it up here. Modern mammals found with dinosaurs, Carl Werner continues to deceive. He's accusing Carl Werner of lying. That's not correct. Carl Werner is not lying. Now, if you've been on this channel long enough, one of my pet peeves is the idea of accusing someone of lying just because you don't agree. I have issues with that because the word lie literally means to intentionally deceive. It means somebody who knows the truth is different from what they're saying and is falsifying information despite what they know differently. Okay? That's what a lie is. So just because you think someone's wrong does not mean you lie. Now, some people will use the word lie in a generic sense, like him referring to this claim as a lie. He can do that if he wants to, but he has to, even then, he has to justify it as a lie. He can't just simply claim it's a lie because, he don't agree with it. Because something could be true and you could be wrong. And what happens if Dr. Duff realizes he is wrong? Does he say, oh, well, I must have lied and just didn't realize it? In fact, I didn't really watch this other video that he made. It's not relevant. I'm assuming he's going to make a lot of the same arguments in this one. But I'll just leave it to Answers in Genesis or someone else to respond to that if I feel compelled to, but I'm not really interested in responding to it. But either way, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is that, of course, he also sat there and, like I said, contradicted himself. Because earlier he said Answers in Genesis agrees with him that it's a different from what the modern beaver is. Now he's saying they're arguing it's the same. Okay, so but I don't take a lie lightly. I don't normally sit there and accuse somebody of lying unless I have good reasons to think that they are lying. And I do think I have good reasons to think that Dr. Duff is lying. I mean, for one thing, he's contradicted himself more than once already. And we ain't a few minutes into the video yet. But he could end up contradicting himself a lot more before the end of this. And of course, people can be inconsistent without lying, but the real lie will come later, and you'll see it in the video firsthand. All right, because take in mind what Dr. Carl Werner, we already called him in some things that just doesn't add up, like him claiming that Answers in Genesis agrees with him on this, and yet claiming that it's a modern beaver, and that sort of thing. So things that's just not adding up here. But that's really not that, because that could always just be him being inconsistent, right? And people do become inconsistent sometimes. But in this case, though, he will be shown to be lying about Carl Werner's position. And we're going to see that as we move forward through this video.
Carl Werner claims to have provided evidence for actual fossils representing modern mammals living right alongside of dinosaurs. So now, I said at the end of this video, I said, if I come across somebody, another young Earth creationist, who continues to make these claims based on Carl Werner's claims and doesn't do the background research to test his ideas, to look at his data and see whether he is lying or not, that I was going to have to say something about it. And, well, here I am. That means somebody's done it. Somebody has continued to make these claims which are lies.
Then there's not lies. Even if you disagree with it, it wouldn't be a lie. It just even if it was wrong, it wouldn't be a lie. It would just be something that's wrong. So a lie would mean intent to deceive. So it's not lie. Now you could argue that you think it's incorrect and that sort of thing, but you still have to have a basis for thinking that. Now, of course, keep in mind first, what is he thinking is incorrect? We've already shown already, and we barely scratched the surface of this video today, but we have already shown that he's misrepresented Carl Werner's position. So exactly what is he calling a lie? His misrepresentation of Carl Werner? My guess is that's what he's referring to as a lie. Secondly, he said that I didn't do the background research. That's incorrect. I actually have Dr. Carl Werner actually provided the evidence for us. I mean, he did all the legwork for us. He took pictures, actual pictures of the fossil, and made those comparisons. So the ones that we can do side by side comparisons, we can see the side to side. But what's he really mean? And this is my third point. What does he really mean by not doing the research? What do you mean by background research? What he really means is to go into what other evolutionists say about it and then agree with their classification, how they classifying it, and assume that it's correct. And I'm not going to do that because I know the classification system is not discovered, it was invented. We choose how to do that. I'm not saying the choice to group these in such a way is arbitrary necessarily. But what I am saying is that we do have a preference to how we choose to group these. And the classification system itself has already demonstrated is constantly in flux. They're always constantly reshuffling things, renaming them, changing it around, changing what constitutes as a quote unquote species, which by the way is a debated term anyhow. And so the lines between species and genus sometimes gets blurred by the classification system. And even then, it's not even perfect because there are times like for example, most mammals give live birth. In fact, that's a distinguishing quality of being a mammal is giving live birth. But yet, there are two mammals that are classified as mammals that don't give live birth. They actually lay eggs. As already mentioned, duckbill platypus and the spiny anteater lay eggs, and they're the only mammals to do so. And yeah, uh, so the classification system would not be perfect in any sense, as far as that goes. And so it's not something that we invent, it's something that we have chosen to group these animals that way. And of course, evolutionary presupposition, you got cladistics, you got all kinds of things that can interfere with that as a result as well. Evolutionary biases play a key role there and so forth. So, yeah, so you can't really blame Dr. Carl Werner or me or anyone for saying they don't trust the modern or the way people are classifying these things in the modern world. You can't blame us for that because look at how much they changed the classification system. As Karina Altman said on my channel from Answers in Genesis, the modern classification system is constantly in flux. Always. It's constantly in flux. So it's constantly changing uh, uh, all the time. And it's not just changing because we've got new data or new fossils. It does that too, but it also changes because people change their mind about what constitutes a species, what constitutes a genus, and that sort of thing. And so they can't be trusted when it comes to naming them. And so you kind of imagine that Dr. Carl Werner and others, we have our reasons for why we don't trust how they're classifying it. And what he has done has argued in a circle. He's assumed that Carl Werner, me, and everyone else is wrong about the fact that they are reclassifying these things differently than what they originally were. or giving them different names like that. And he has to assume that we're wrong on that, and that the way that they're classifying it today is the correct way. That it is that if they say this is a particular species, it is. If they say it's a different species, it's a different species. If they say it's a different genus, it's a different genus, etc., etc., etc. And that is what he's assuming. And so when he says quote unquote background research, what he's actually saying is that he thinks that that we should go with the modern classification of these animals, and that's not the case. We're not going to go with the modern classification because the modern classification could, in fact, be um, perhaps wrong is the wrong term here. It could be not exactly true. Uh, I don't know how to say this because it's really not a question of right and wrong here. It's more because I'm not saying it's wrong to group animals according to some kind of preference, but it is wrong to apply that in a universal fashion where you assume that just because you label something in a different way or in a different category automatically means that it is of a different category. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. I don't want to say that it's wrong because it's not wrong necessarily to group things in a particular classification. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but it is wrong with the way in which that is being applied in arguments, in evolutionary tactics, and things like that. And so we will have an issue with how they're doing that. All right, let's continue.
Let's take a look at just a small piece of a video by a YouTube channel named Apologetics 101, who hosted Carl Werner. And we're actually going to listen to Carl Werner make the original claim that he's been making for more than a decade. And he's going to repeat it again. Exactly what I pointed out in this other video is a lie. So let's talk about that lie after we watch him telling the lie once again.
So, in other words, he's going to say that it's beaver like. He's going to say that that's a lie, and you'll see him shaking his head when he's saying that. So, I want you to catch that. In the clip, in the very clip he's showing, Carl Werner will say that the evolutionist said, in reference to beaver, beaver like. That's what he says, and that's what the paper says. He will later say, admit to the other papers saying it was like a beaver. And yet, this is supposed to be a lie, according to Dr. Duff. So, let's see if you can catch what he's going to do. Because I'll explain it here in a second after he gets through responding to this clip real quick.
Before we go, I want to ask you another question on mammals. You found mammals with the dinosaurs, didn't you?
Yes, 400 species of mammals have been found with dinosaurs. 400. You know, there's only 700 dinosaur species, but 400.
Don't evolutionists think that mammals and dinosaurs are separated by like millions of years?
No, they would say, if you ask the expert, we interviewed the expert there, Dr. Jeshi Lowe at Carnegie, they would say 400 species of mammals lived during the time of the dinosaurs. But see, the public's never told that, you know. And what are these 400 animals? They're all weird names. You would have to take 10 years of your life going around trying to photograph each one. But I can say for sure that the evolution scientists would say of these 400, the following look like modern animals. Like there looked like there was a duckbill platypus mammal next to a dinosaur. That's one. There looked like there was a beaver-like animal next to a dinosaur. There's two.
You hear him say beaver like, right? And you see Dr. Duff shaking his head no.
Like there was a hedgehog mammal next to the dinosaur. There's three. There looked like there was a Tasmanian devil next to a dinosaur. There's four. It looked like there's a possum next to a dinosaur. There's five. You know, and they would probably come up with a list of 10 or so like that. But no one's ever done the work like we have for this general picture just go and look at these 400 mammals and compare the rest of them. None of them are big. The biggest one is about 25 pounds. It was called Rapinomanus, and it was a Tasmanian devil kind of like animal, and it had a dinosaur in its stomach, a baby dinosaur. So, but they haven't found a giraffe next to a dinosaur or a lion. I'm not saying that, but they have found 400 species of mammals, and they have found 10 or so modern versions, or they look like the modern type, next to dinosaurs.
You see Joel shaking his head, right? He said they look like the modern type, okay? He didn't say that they were exactly, not all of them, but he's saying that they at least look like the modern type. But Joel is shaking his head. Take note of that.
So that's enough. That's what I predicted. You should find some. And generally, when they find a mammal in a rock layer, they'll say it's not from the dinosaur.
Okay, there we are. All right. Now, there was a number of notable items in that short clip. Okay.
Yes, there was.
So, do you catch that? We've got Carl Werner is claiming that there are 400 or so species of mammals that have been found alongside mammal fossils found in the same layers of rock that dinosaur bones have been found. I'm going to say that the relatively accurate statement. I don't know exactly how many different mammals it is now, but 400-ish sounds very reasonable. He went on to say that there's, he's trying to contrast that with, well, like there's only 700 dinosaurs. So it's almost as if mammals and dinosaurs were almost equal numbers. And of course, his larger point is that somehow modern scientists and evolutionary biologists somehow ignore the mammals, and we only like to show the dinosaurs. And so we're creating a false perception of what the past world was like. So he's saying 400 and 700. Well, there's a lot more than 700 species of dinosaurs. There's a lot of debate about exactly how many dinosaurs. I mean, there's probably 13 or 1400 at least named, and of course there's probably many more that we haven't found. Just like there's going to be more mammals that we have.
All right, the 700 are for known species, and what he said there about dinosaurs, 700 dinosaurs is correct. That Dr. Carl Werner said about 700 dinosaurs is correct. There are 700 known species of dinosaurs. There's not 13 or 1400. I don't know where he's getting that number from. All the sources that I found have said 700. Some might say like up to 900, but they rarely will say that. I think mostly they're just basically working out the potentiality that there could be more that we don't know about. But I'll show you a source here that both Joel and me would agree is a credible source. Okay, we're at the American Museum of Natural History. Dinosaur facts. Basic dinosaur facts. Look below here. All non-avian dinosaurs went extinct about 66 million years ago. This, of course, is based on evolutionary presuppositions. There are roughly 700 known species of extinct dinosaurs. Now that's an observable fact. Known species of extinct dinosaurs. Okay. And this source right here, USGS, also says this. This is a .gov site, so this is government. And it says approximately 700 species have been named. However, a scientific review suggests that only about half of these are based on fairly complete specimens that can be shown to be unique and separate species. These species are placed in about 300 dinosaur genera. 540 have been named, although about 500 have been named. Recent estimates suggest about 700 to 900 more dinosaurs genera remain to be discovered. In other words, what they're saying is that there's a potential for more dinosaur fossils. Now, there's no way to know that, of course. That's their expectation, that there's a possibility that could be. But then again, if you can throw out numbers, you could also throw out thousands or hundreds or even 20. So, yeah, you're just throwing out numbers of what you think that might be possible. And there's always the potential possibility. I mean, we've been living in today's world for a long time, and we still find new species we didn't know existed. So we still find new species that used to exist that no longer exist. And we're still finding those too. So there's always the possibility of finding more than 700. Um, Dr. Carl Werner told me recently when we were in a creation meeting, we had a meeting of creationists that was on another guy's channel. Actually, I mentioned him earlier, Denzel. We had a meeting on his channel on, I guess it was on Rumble. He's on Rumble, and I haven't found the meeting yet, so I don't know if he's got that up or not, or if it was something being recorded or not. But it was great having that discussion with Dr. Carl Werner. We had it on frauds, like 8 million frauds and things like that. And so that was an interesting discussion. But anyway, um, he told me that there's always a possibility you could find a source somewhere that says it. But now I have not personally found that source. The highest I found is a Wikipedia article. See if I can find here. A Wikipedia article here. Dinosaurs are diverse groups, reptiles. Now this one right here tried to argue. Okay, it said argue for 900 extinct genera and then 1,000 different species of non-avian dinosaurs. Now what we're going to see in this is that he's going to rely heavily on Wikipedia, and we're going to see this in this video as well. Wikipedia is not a scholarly source. It's not scientific at all. It's not an academic source. For one thing, anyone can put anything they want to on there, and other people can put anything they want. Up until recently, they used to not allow. They didn't care if you put sources or not. That's why you would find a Wikipedia page that says if anyone could think of a source, no sources to add sources. But so you didn't have to put sources on there. But now, recently, they did make people put sources, but it's not peer review, so they don't check the sources out. It doesn't matter whether your sources are credible or you're taking someone out of context, whatever. But they just require sources now. I guess for copyright purposes, I guess. And because Wikipedia's got a bad reputation for that. And too many people not leaving sources and stuff. So now they make it a rule now. But see, the thing is, you have no idea who what the original writer was. You have no idea if someone comes in there and edits it or who those editors are. They're unnamed. They're unknown. So you don't know that. So universities and colleges and stuff, they say that Wikipedia is not a credible academic source, not credible scientific, not credible, not a credible scholarly source. It's a free encyclopedia on the internet. That's what it is. That's what a PD is. It's a free encyclopedia on the internet that someone can come in and edit it, change it, whatever. It's not peer review. Yeah, you can make anything you want to out of it. But critics love Wikipedia, namely because it has evolutionary presuppositions, of course. So, but Wikipedia is the one that I found with the highest number. But all the credible sources, you saw that one from the government site, the one from the American Natural Museum site, and both of those say 700 extinct known species. Now, there's always the potential that there are species that we don't know about, but we don't know about the ones we don't know about. So we can't really, you can't really just sit there and argue from the absence of what we don't have. That's called an argument from ignorance. You can't do that. You can't argue from the missing. You can't argue from missing evidence like that. But we don't have that. We don't have that information. But what the information that we do have, it appears that all the credible ones I found said 700. So I think that Carl Werner is correct on this, that it is 700. I'm not sure where he's getting 1,300. Even the Wikipedia article doesn't even say 1,300. So I don't know. I don't know where he's getting that number. I would love to hear him source that information so I can check it out for myself. But but all the credible sources that I checked, including the government one, both said 700 as the number of extant known species. Okay, known species. That's what we're talking about there.
Haven't found. But the big thing he gets to is then out of these 400, you notice that? Out of these 434 or whatever number he used there, out of those 434, there's like 10 of them that are like modern mammals, right? They're just the same as modern mammals. Now, what does he mean?
All right. Did you guys see that? Okay. What did Carl Werner say? He said that they were like modern versions of the mammals. Okay. He wasn't saying they were, but that they were like it. All right. That's what he said. Okay. Uh, Dr. Joe Duff disagrees with that. So we're going to see where he's going with this.
Mean by modern mammals? Then he gives a couple of examples, right? He gives the example of the beaver. Well, that's the one I discussed in the other video. And I talked about that particular beaver and how it's not a beaver, right? There's a fossil that's...
Is that what Dr. Werner said? No. What Dr. Werner said was that it was like a beaver. There's similarities with it as a beaver. Now, whether it is a beaver or not, again, as Dr. Werner pointed out, we will have to have these fossils side by side, do a side by side comparison to know whether it is the same or not. We can't trust a modern classification system because they will steer us wrong, very much so. They will reclassify things and they shift constantly in the way they classify things on the modern classification system, in the modern classification system. So we can't rely on them on this, okay? So we have to rely on our own our own side by side comparison. By doing a side by side comparison, we're going to rely on that because that's the only way to know for sure if it's the same, or if it's exactly the same or not exactly the same. But since we don't have that, what we're going to go with is what the evolutionists themselves are saying about the fossil, not where they're reclassifying it, okay, but where they are saying about it. What they're saying about it is that it's like a beaver and it has similar characteristics for a beaver, that it was aquatic, that most likely had web feet. They found strong evidence of fur, okay, so the creature had fur. They know the size of the creature from the fossil. It has seal-like teeth for eating fish, and they know that it has a tail identical to a beaver's. And Joel does admit that it does have a tail like similar to a beaver, you know. And as a result, it has all these similarities that make it very close to what we would consider to be a modern beaver. Does that make it a modern beaver? No, but it comes very close to at least looking like one. Okay, we can sit there and argue whether it is one or not. I mean, that's a different topic matter entirely. But here, Joel Duff is shifting from it being like a beaver to it being a beaver. Okay, that's not what Carl Werner is arguing. Okay, we don't have the side by side comparison to make sure of whether it's a beaver or not. What he is arguing is that it's like a beaver, which is what the evolutionists themselves are admitting to. All right, let's continue.
It's been named or called just in just common name of the Jurassic beaver. It turns out, though, that the original paper never refers to it as a beaver, never even talks about having beaver-like characteristics.
Okay, this right here is an argument from silence. If the original paper doesn't mention it, therefore it doesn't have it. Every single thing that we've seen since then, including any paper that's been written since then, have said it has beaver-like characteristics, has similarities to beaver. And all and I showed you some of the sources, and they showed that it did have similarities to a beaver. And he will also admit to having similarities to a beaver. So what is the point in arguing from silence here? It's irrelevant. Okay, the fact that the original paper doesn't mention these similarities does not make it so. That's called an argument from silence.
Now, it did happen to have sort of a flattened tail, and that's the only reason it's called a beaver. But that particular fossil
Okay, you hear that, right? That's the only similarity it had, according to Dr. Duff.
represents a group of organisms that are in no way related to modern beavers. They're not part of the modern beaver kind. They're not in the beaver family. They're not even in the family. They're not even the order, larger group of mammals that this particular fossil's in.
Okay, he's relying on what they have chosen to classify it under. Okay, and we already saw that's unreliable. Their classification of it is completely unreliable as a result. So that's what Dr. Duff is saying. He's saying that since they have classified it this way, therefore it must not be this way. It can't be related to a beaver. It can't even be a beaver. Da da da. But that is fallacious. That is absolutely fallacious. He's basically argued his way into a circle. He assumed a position, assumed that Carl Werner was wrong, that the way in which it's being classified today is correct, and that is incorrect. The fact that someone, or at least that the way in which it's classified, it may not be, at least in the way in which they're defining species, order, genus, it may not necessarily be in that way. Or it could be something related to a beaver, but we don't know. We don't have a side by side comparison. All we have is what other evolutionists are saying about it. And what other evolutionists are saying about it is that it does have similarities with a beaver, that there are beaver like similarities. That is what is being referenced here. Now, they're not saying it is a beaver, and we're not saying it is a beaver, but it has characteristics that are very similar to that of a beaver. Okay? And I think it's more than just the tail, too, by the way. That's similar.
This particular fossil is outside of all modern mammals living today, unrelated, more distantly related to any of the mammals that are alive today. Like it's as different from a marsupial is from you and I. That's how different it is from a beaver, right? So, all right, so the beaver claim completely wrong.
Did Carl Werner say it was a beaver at any given time? Not in the clip, not in his book, not in his interview with me. So what? So you saw the shift here, right? You saw the shift. He went from, okay, Carl Werner saying beaver like in the video. You read the original reply that he made on my channel on that video, right? Original reply, he actually does claim that, okay, he admitted that he said in the video beaver like. He thinks he contradicted what he's been saying the last 10 years. We found out that's not true either because it's in his book. But he is arguing now that Carl Werner is saying it's a beaver, and then he's saying that's wrong. And it's wrong because that's not how they're classifying, which nobody is disputing the fact that they're classifying it differently anyhow. Now, we can say we don't agree with that classification or whatnot, but nobody's doubting that they are classifying it differently. Okay? But that does not necessarily mean it is different. It just means that this is the way they are classifying it. But it is very similar to that of a beaver. Now, we're not saying it is a beaver. Could be. It could be, or something related to a beaver. We don't know. There's no way to tell unless we can do a side-by-side comparison, and they're not letting us do a side-by-side comparison. But it does have similar aspects to similar characteristics to a beaver. That's what we're saying. That's all we're saying. Dr. Joel Duff is going one step further than this by arguing that we're saying that it was a beaver. Did we say that? No. I don't remember even saying that in any of my replies to Dr. Joel Duff. Most of them have been centered around the general understanding of the side-by-side reference to the pictures and the fossils looking similar. But I don't remember saying anything about it definitely being a beaver. I think there's a good chance that it could be, but or something similar, maybe the same kind of beaver. I don't know. It could be, maybe, maybe. But I'm not arguing that it is because there's no way to confirm that. As Dr. Werner pointed out, there right now we can't confirm it because nobody is letting us do a side by side comparison here. Um, and so we can't do a comparison. So what Dr. Werner's done is he's latched on to what other evolutionists have said about the finding. And this is what they've said about the finding. And Dr. Joel Duff said, nope, that's not correct. When he said beaver-like characteristics, then he goes into detail and says, oh, well, it's definitely not a beaver. It's not even related to a beaver. First of all, he doesn't even know that. He's just saying that because he's assuming the modern classification system. And secondly, it's circle. He has to assume that we're wrong. And third, it's a misrepresentation because Dr. Carl Werner did not say it was a beaver. Okay. Did y'all hear him say it was a beaver? No, he said it was beaver-like characteristics. He said there's like 10 or so that have these similarities that are very similar to that of a modern version of these animals. He's not saying they are the modern versions of these animals.
And he's wrong because he simply looked at a report from a science writer who, just to give like some feeling for the readers, like what was this animal? What did it kind of look like? Well, it kind of looked like a beaver. All right. I mean, there are reptiles that kind of look like mammals. All right. But just because they kind of look like a mammal doesn't mean they are a mammal.
What reptile looks like a mammal? Reptiles have scales. Oh, mammals usually don't have scales. So I'm not exactly sure what. It would be nice if Dr. Joel Duff offers some examples, maybe even some sources here. But I don't know of any. What mammal is he thinking of that looks like a reptile? Reptiles are like snakes and see. I think I think turtles are reptiles. If I'm not mistaken. I know snakes are, for sure. Yeah, turtles are reptiles. They're not amphibians. Um, that don't look like no mammal. Snakes certainly don't look like no mammal. So exactly what reptile looks like a mammal? I don't know. I have no idea. Doesn't make no sense. We know what mammals look like. I don't know of any reptiles that look like a mammal. So that's odd. Maybe Komodo dragon. No, because Komodo dragon looks like a big alligator. So so I don't know. I don't know what he's thinking of there. I don't know of any reptiles that look like a mammal. So I would need some examples there. It would be interesting to look up, see if there's any reptiles that look like mammals. Maybe there is. I don't know. But regardless, um, uh, okay, he's saying, okay, these sources, it isn't just the science writer that's saying this. There are sources, and I've showed you several sources that actually do actually identify similarities between that of a beaver and this animal. Doesn't mean it is a beaver necessarily. Doesn't necessarily mean it's related to a beaver. It could be. But it doesn't necessarily mean that. But it does mean that there are similarities with it. It's a mammal with similarities to that of a beaver. Now, whether it's related, whether it is, again, we need the evidence for that. We don't have it because the people that do have the evidence aren't sharing. So they're not allowing us to do side-by-side comparison, photograph these things, and so that way we can see whether or not if they have similarities that match it. I don't know why they're not letting us do that. You wouldn't think that it would be a problem for them to sit there and release this information to Dr. Werner and let him take a picture of it. I mean, all he's doing is taking a picture. They can supervise. He doesn't even have to handle the fossil at all. All he's doing is taking a picture of it. But he isn't. But anyway, a lot of these museums are trying to give the impression of these mammals not being around. And in all honesty, up until recently, I actually thought that evolutionists thought that mammals were separated from dinosaurs. I didn't realize there were evolutionists that admit that mammals existed during the time of the dinosaurs. And that's weird because you don't expect that under the evolutionary perception of evolution. Allegedly, mammals were supposed to evolve millions of years after dinosaurs. Maybe that's something they used to admit to or believe in, but then they changed their belief as time went on and they realized, oops, we found some animals with dinosaur fossils, so we can't argue that anymore. And so then up until recently, they just kind of argue, well, maybe it's shrew size mammals. You know, these are really, really, really small mammals. So, you know, early development, early evolutionary history, that sort of thing. And so they just figured, you know, it's nothing to not anything to worry about, anything to be concerned of. And then they found this beaver, and they're like, "Oops, okay, there's something bigger than what we were expecting to find." You know, so I always enjoy watching evolutionists' mouth drop to the floor because their expectations is not matching their evolutionary perception. So it always fills me with a lot of joy whenever I see that. But any given case, ultimately that's what happened. And so this has beaver-like characteristics. Dr. Werner is going with what evolutionists themselves have said about this find, and he originally said, nope, it doesn't have beaver-like characteristics. Then he changed it to Carl Werner allegedly saying that it was a beaver. Did Carl Werner say that? No. He didn't say it was a beaver. He said it was like a beaver with beaver-like characteristics. And he denied that. He said, well, he's getting this from a science writer. No, he's not getting it from a science writer, or not just a science writer. There are other sources. And by the way, it was Carl Werner that gave me all those sources that I showed you earlier. Carl Werner is the one who gave me those sources and linked them in the email to me. So he has other sources that also say the same thing, and other evolutionists have said the same thing. Other news reports have said the same thing, assuming evolutionary presuppositions even, and they've said the same thing. So it's not just this particular evolutionist that is saying it. There are other evolutionists that are also saying it, that this has beaver-like characteristics. Now, you can argue all day long whether it was a beaver or something related to a beaver or not related to it at all. I'm sure Dr. Joel Duff would, but the bottom line is it is something that has characteristics that is similar to a beaver. Now, that much everyone seems to be in agreement to. Dr. Werner mentions that also in the email. I didn't put that anywhere in the slides, I don't think. But he did actually say that all evolutionists agree that it has beaver-like characteristics. That is universally agreed among other evolutionists that it has beaver-like characteristics. Now, they're not going to, that doesn't mean that they're saying that it is a beaver, but they are admitting to it having characteristics similar to a beaver. Okay, that's what they're admitting to.
And specifically related to an individual, very particular mammal. Yet Carl Warner's like, there were beavers found alongside of dinosaurs.
Did you catch the straw man argument? This is intentional. He just shifted. He shifted from saying beaver-like characteristics. This is what Carl Werner said. He said, nope, that's not true. Then he turns around and shifts it to Carl Werner is saying there was beavers found alongside dinosaurs, alongside dinosaurs. Is that what the Carl Werner said? No. Not in the clip, not in his interview with me, not in his book, not in his email to me. Not at all. That's not what he said. This is an intentional strawman, and an intentional strawman argument is a deception. It is outright lying because he knows that Carl Werner said beaver like, not that it is a beaver. Not that it is a beaver, but beaver like. It could be a beaver. There's always that possibility, but there's no way to confirm that without doing a direct side by side comparison, and no one's letting us do that, which is a problem. That's why he's not taking that extra step and saying it's a beaver. He's not doing that. Whether instead what he's doing is he's saying it's beaver like characteristics, which is what they, the evolutionists, are willing to admit to.
False. It goes on to say that there was a Tasmanian devil. The last thing he's talking about, the Tasmanian devil, and he mentions the actual name of that organism, like the scientific name of it. Right? Do a quick Google search. I'm not gonna do it for you here. I'm not gonna do it for the host of Apologetics 101, who is interviewing Carl Werner and who claims that Carl Werner's done all this research. Right? I challenge him to simply Google that name and just read the Wikipedia page on that particular organism.
Wikipedia page. Okay, in the comment section, back and forth, you can look and read our comments to each other. I actually told him that Wikipedia is not considered an academic source at all. As far as I know, nobody thinks it's an academic source. Lay evolutionists like it because it's convenient, it's free, it's easy. It appears on top of a Google search a lot of times because Google don't own Wikipedia, but the owner of Google likes Wikipedia, so it appears a lot on the top of Google because they tend to play favorites, which works good for us on YouTube because YouTube is owned by Google and they play favorites with us too. So, but anyway, they like to play favorites with it, and so it appears a lot at the top or on the first page of a Google search, and so a lot of critics like it. It's easy, it's convenient, it's free, doesn't cost anything, but it's not an academic source. But again, let's say he did hunt down an academic source. Let's say he found a peer review paper that specifically references this animal. By the way, I could find nothing peer review on the Tasmanian light devil. I did look for it for the longest time. Today, actually, it was either today or yesterday. I think it was today. Lots happened. But anyway, I did actually look for Tasmanian like. I could find nothing in the literature on Tasmanian like devil, and very few articles written on it. So there's not a whole lot, unless you know where to look. I guess maybe Dr. Duff knows where to look, but I actually did search for it doing a Google search. So my guess is that he's claiming this, but he's not actually done the search on Google himself. So if he did, he would have known what he would find. I could find nothing peer review on it. There could be others. I don't know. But any given case, it wouldn't matter because what he's basically saying, hey, look how they're classifying it. Therefore, that must mean it is this way. No, that doesn't mean that way. And I try to tell him that in the comment section too, in our back and forth. I try to tell him that the fact that they classify it doesn't make it so. It's a circle argument. He's assuming we're wrong straight off the bat, and right out the front door, he's assuming that we're wrong, and it's really a misrepresentation of what we're saying anyhow. But he is automatically assuming that it definitely is. He's assuming the classification, so he's assuming we're wrong about the classification system, and he's assuming that they're right, that it should be classified as that. Oh, wait a minute, that's way different from a Tasmanian devil. Of course, Dr. Werner did not say it was a Tasmanian devil. Remember that citation I cited earlier? Part of that was Tasmanian-like. He says Tasmanian-like, and that was one of the list of creatures that he could not have a side-by-side comparison with. So whenever he refers to the Tasmanian, he doesn't call it a Tasmanian devil. He calls it Tasmanian devil-like. That's what he says. In other words, it had, according to the, and this is what the evolutionists are saying, it has similarities to a Tasmanian devil. Doesn't mean it was. Doesn't mean they're calling it that. Doesn't mean that it's related to a Tasmanian devil. It could be all of those things, but it doesn't mean any of that. What they're saying, or at least what the evolutionists are admitting to, is that there are similarities between the Tasmanian devil in the modern period versus the fossil find. They're not saying it is a Tasmanian devil, but there are similarities. That's what they're saying, and that's what they're admitting to, and that's what we're saying, because we don't have the fossil to, because they're not letting us do a side-by-side comparison, just like with the beaver. No, with the possum they did with Carl Werner. It's in his book, the possum-like creature. They did do that, and there are some similarities. It's not exact by any stretch, but it does enough similarities to make you think that they could be in the same family, possibly. But it is there. But like Dr. Werner said, most, not all of them, but most of them do have that they were able to do a side by side comparison, do have some similarities that are striking, similar to modern animals. That's what he's arguing. He is trying to be very careful about how he's arguing. He doesn't want to argue too much or put his foot in his mouth or anything like that. So he's being very cautious with how he's wording these things and how he's saying them so people understand exactly what he's saying. Now, Dr. Duff has strawmanned, has misrepresented what Carl Werner has actually said, both in his clip, in my interview with him, as well as in his book. He has misrepresented him, but yeah, he knows that Dr. Carl, at least in this video, he knows that Dr. Carl Werner used the term things like beaver-like, Tasmanian devil-like. He knows how he's to set it. He's expressed it in such a way that he's saying there is similarity there. Doesn't mean that they think that it's the same, but it is similarity there between that and the modern mammals. That is what he's arguing. He's trying not to go too far with the things that we can't do a side-by-side comparison of.
The particular organism is described as a member of an extinct family that is distantly related to all modern mammals. It's even more different than modern mammals than even the monotremes, right? The egg-laying mammals. Potentially, it was an egg-laying mammal itself. And yet, so clearly not a marsupial, right?
The egg-laying part was speculation. You can't take a speculation and use that to prove something or disprove it.
The original research, the original article that describes that fossil, I looked it up. No mention of having marsupial-like features. I mean, marsupials are distinct organisms, right? Distinct type of mammal, as opposed to the placentals, right? And yet, nothing about that article, nothing that you would read about that particular fossil would make you think at all that that organism was a marsupial, much less a possum.
Okay, here he is again arguing from silence. He says he could not find anything that's written in that particular paper, although he doesn't really provide the sources for it, that says anything about it having marsupial-like traits. Okay, for start with, nobody's arguing that. We don't know if it does. I don't know if it does. We don't have a side-by-side comparison to see. Of course, I would have to wonder what would qualify as a marsupial-like trait. The only obvious one would be the pouch on front, but we're talking about fossils here, and that pouch wouldn't be present. So I don't know exactly if there's something in the bone that could tell you whether it's a marsupial or not. I don't know. But in any given case, the fact that it doesn't mention it doesn't make it not the case. This is an argument from silence.
yes, it was kind of a small little organism with kind of a long tail and four little feet and kind of a projected nose, right? And so when you put those characteristics together, it's kind of like, hey, it's kind of possum like in its features. That's like going.
Okay. He made you think he was talking about the Tasmanian devil like, because that's what he was talking about. But he switched to the possum like. So he is admitting that the possum like creature does have similarities. All right. This is the possum like from Dr. Werner's book. See, can you see all that? See it? Okay. When you look at it, see, here's the fossil right here. That's fossil. Yep. Right here, fossil. Okay. You see up here. Yep, right here. My camera is kind of reversed from where I'm at. So you can see here and up here what the modern possum looks like and compare it. It is very similar. Doesn't mean it's exact, but as we pointed out with the variations with the dogs, dogs can be different. The breeds of dogs can be very different and wildly different, even in skull shapes and sizes and looks, and yet be the same species. So that wouldn't necessarily rule it out as the same species just because it has differences. But so we're not saying that Carl Werner is not saying that it's exactly the same as a possum. He mentions that there are other species of possums that you would be able to compare it to, which he has obviously hasn't done that. But has compared it to a possum, a modern possum, and was able to do a side to side, and there is similarity. Um, uh, and of course, Dr. Joel Duff appears to agree that there's similarity, but then he's arguing that there's also differences, which we're not disagreeing with the differences, that there are differences there. There could be differences, but he's arguing that just because it has similarities, therefore that doesn't mean that it's related. But yet, that's not what we're arguing. What we're arguing is that there are mammals that are found along dinosaur fossils that have similarities with modern mammals. Some of them are very striking, some of them are exact. You know, like in the case of the nautilus, it looks exactly like it. Looks exactly like it. Whether I'm not saying that that necessarily means it were exactly like it or were in every respect, but in the case of the fossil, you look at it, it looks exactly like it. Now, of course, there are others that look very close, similar, to, but there could be some differences. And you can have differences in a species. They can have differences and be the same species. So, you know, the fact that it's different, that they have some differences or something like that, would not necessarily rule them out for being a same species, but they do have similarities as well. And so that's the only thing that's being argued there is similarities. In some cases, the similarities are striking. In other cases, they're a little bit more superficial. But anyway, that is. But possum, I find that there's a lot of really good similarities between that the possum. But what is being argued there? Evolutionists are willing to say possum-like animal. That's what the evolutionists are willing to say. Possum-like animal. Okay, and doesn't mean that they concede that it's a possum. They just concede that there's similarities between that and the possum, and they admit that it is like a possum. You know, there's a possibility it could be a possum. Okay, but it is like a possum.
Carl Warner's entire argument is based on some superficial characteristic, which is similar to a characteristic of a modern mammal, but that doesn't make it a modern mammal.
Is that what Carl Werner said? Let me know in the comments if you think that Dr. Carl Werner said that. That's not what Dr. Carl Werner said. Dr. Carl Werner said that it has similarities. There's a possibility it could be the same as a modern mammal. Okay, and we have to accept that possibility. Evolutionists don't want to accept it, but it's a possibility. But what we're saying is that it's similar to a modern mammal. Okay, And the evolutionists themselves are saying it's similar to a modern mammal. Okay? That's what they're saying. Now, he says, oh, well, that doesn't make it the modern mammal. Okay, I agree. That doesn't necessarily make it a modern mammal. It doesn't mean it's not, but doesn't mean it is, right? It doesn't mean either one. You have to do a side-by-side comparison. And I think there's a very likely possibility that it could be a modern mammal, um, but or something related to a modern mammal. But we don't know for sure, at least not from the fossils. Fossils are highly interpretive, so it's very difficult to really nail down a position if all you're using is fossils. Now, we have a book on history called the Bible, and it actually does tell us that all these animals were created in the creation week, and so we know that, and so we do know that these animals did exist alongside the dinosaurs, that people exist alongside the dinosaurs, and evolutionary view of history is wrong. We know this because we have a book on history. Evolutionists don't. What they do is they have fossils and they have strata and they have their interpretation of that data. That's what they have. They don't have an actual book on history definitively telling them this is case, this is true, this is not true. Christians do, but they don't. Okay. So they have to make certain interpretations from the fossils. And obviously, they're making interpretations here where they're interpreting this as not modern mammals. Now, just to make sure that we do not overstep our bounds, what we're saying is that it's similar to modern mammals, that it's like the modern mammals. Whether it is or not, we could argue about that all day. And I know I've argued with Joel Duff, so I know he would. He would argue about it all day long. But it's not going to change anything. The evolutionists themselves, okay, are saying this about that fossil. They may not admit that it is a modern mammal. They may not believe it's a modern mammal. And they don't claim it's a modern mammal. But what they are saying is it's like a modern mammal. Okay? It's like it. It has similar characteristics to a modern mammal. Now, Joel can disagree with that. He's welcome to disagree with it. But that is what the evolutionists themselves are saying. And I told Dr. Joel Duff that he's getting information, that Dr. Werner is getting information from other evolutionists that have actually examined these things. And they're saying that it's like a beaver, that it's like the Tasmanian devil. Doesn't mean they're conceding that it is, but they're the ones who are using these terminologies. They're the ones who are claiming it is similar. Okay?
Now, he listed off several other things. He talked about a hedgehog. Hedgehog is the same thing. Go look up, just do a Google search on.
He said hedgehog like. And he says that in his book too. Hedgehog like.
Hedgehog like organism, like fossil, found.
Okay, now, okay, you see what he did, right? He went from saying that Carl Werner said that there's a hedgehog, and then he says, oh, well, look at what they're actually saying. They're saying hedgehog like. What did Carl Werner actually say? Hedgehog like.
With the dinosaurs.
In fact, I can find it in the book. All right, I found it in the book right here, and it does say hedgehog-like mammal in the book. see that in the title here. See if I can, yep, right here. Hedgehog-like mammal. Okay, and he shows a picture of it. Got the regular hedgehog. Then you go look over here, see the jawbone, and it matches that of the animal here. See, I'm trying to make sure y'all can see it. All right, you see that up here, right here, up here, right here. Okay, yeah, that is in his book, and it does have similarities to that of a hedgehog, including in the skull and the teeth and that sort of thing, and they are very similar to that of hedgehog. So again, he's careful in his wording, hedgehog-like. That's what he said, and that's what the evolutionists themselves are saying. Did he say it was a hedgehog? No, he said it was hedgehog-like.
And you'll come right to the various articles, including the original research article, if you look hard enough, that describes this hedgehog-like creature that lived in the time of the dinosaurs. Now, what makes it hedgehog-like? So, I mean, hedgehogs are these...
No, you heard what Dr. Werner said. It's a hedgehog-like.
Spiny mammals, right? So that's a particular adaptation of the epidermis and the hairs and all that stuff that make this sort of spiny projections all over the body. So there's been a fossil found of a mammal type organism, all right, a type of mammal, although not any kind of modern mammal, that has some kind of quills on it that are very much like a hedgehog, and the animal is of similar size to a hedgehog. That does not make it a hedgehog, okay? Because if you go to the original research and you find out, like, anatomically, the bones of the organism and other things, especially the teeth, right? The teeth are a giveaway because all modern therians, all right, marsupials and placentals have particular tooth types, all right, and shapes, all right, the jaws and all that stuff, all right? And this is from another group that is extinct, right? The entire group, all the different species and the members of it, that is a different group of mammals, not placentals, not marsupials, right? And not the egg-laying monotremes. Another completely extinct group has completely different characteristics that make it obvious that they're not any of those modern types of mammals that we have alive today. But this particular animal happened to have a quill-like feature that does not make it a hedgehog. It makes it an organism that has similar features to a hedgehog. It's kind of like, kind of like a dinosaur, maybe, like an organism that has dinosaur-like features but also has feathers.
Okay, no dinosaur's been found with feathers, but that's another story, another video. Actually, I already have a video out there talking about that with me and Dr. Gabriella Haynes, showing these two right here are modern. These two right here are modern. And this one right here is the fossil. And you can tell by similarities in the teeth that there are similarities between that and that of a hedgehog. He said you could tell by the teeth, by his own admission, and yet the teeth is among the ones that he has put in the hedgehog. And he says hedgehog jaw, the title of this, on this high up here, is hedgehog. I don't know if you can see it. It says hedgehog jaw similar to dinosaur era mammal jaw. Is how he titled it. And it's very, very similar. Okay? And he just got through saying, yeah, if you could tell by the teeth. Well, my guess is Dr. Duff has never actually read living fossils, or it's been so long his memory is not what it used to be, or whatever the case may be, and he's not remembering. I'm not accusing him of lying on that. I just think he honestly doesn't have that information. He doesn't know what Dr. Werner actually presented in his book. Obviously, he's making a lot of errors here, but I'm not accusing him of lying here. I think he's being kind of deceptive with Dr. Werner's position, because he knows that he said beaver-like, but yeah, he's presenting it like he's saying it is a beaver, which he didn't say. So, I think he's being deceptive there. I don't think he's being deceptive here. I think he honestly, I think he just, I don't think I personally am of the mindset that he has not read Dr. Werner's book, Living Fossils. He's not acting like he's read it. But that could be due to the fact that, it's been a while since he's actually read the Living Fossils, if he read Living Fossils at all. But he's not acting like someone who knows that information is in here, and that's a issue, right? Because he isn't aware of it. He's making these arguments as if he doesn't even know what Dr. Werner had actually presented in his book, including with the evidence. And the funny thing is, if you have Dr. Werner's book on living fossils, which I do, obviously, then you can actually show, oh, wait a minute, he does talk about the teeth being similar. And yet, that's exactly what Dr. Joel Duff just got through saying, right? He's like, oh, well, you could tell by the teeth. Apparently, he has either never seen living. You think that, whenever I do a video, whether it's an interview or just something I'm discussing with you guys, one of the things I try to do is prepare and research, study, collect, bring things together, test my audio, test everything I need to test. And that's what I do because I want to make sure that I am uh, being able to be ready to do this video and to do this research and to do this study and to show you and demonstrate to you the truth of the matter. And if I'm not sure of something, I'll send people emails, or I will do the research, or I'll buy some books, or whatever I need to do to make sure that the information I am presenting is as accurate to the best of my knowledge. And so naturally, you know, I've got my Living Fossils book here out in case I have to discuss what Dr. Carl Werner actually said in his original book on living fossils. And obviously, if Duff had read that, assuming he still has that book, assuming he's ever had that book, he's obviously not bought that book. If he hasn't got it, he hasn't bought it. And if he does have, if he had bought it, he's not putting it out so that he can get that book ready. If he needs to prove from that book that Carl Werner's the deceiver that he thinks he is, it would be easy to do from that book if Dr. Carl Werner was being deceptive. Now, Dr. Carl Werner was not being deceptive. And we saw that from his book, and we saw that from the quotes, we saw that from the slides, we saw that what he presented to me in the email, we saw that from the interview that I had with him, and we even saw that from the clip that Joel played. But yet Joel himself is being deceptive with this information, and that's bad. Now, not all of it, because I think that he is here. I think he's just being, well, he's just ignorant of what Carl Werner has actually argued and shown and demonstrated in living fossils. But if you're going to disprove somebody, you better get their material that they have out, whether it be videos, whether it be books, whatever the case may be. And the best way to do that with Carl Werner is to get his original book and look it over and review it from that point. But Dr. Joel Duff doesn't appear to have done that, which is kind of ironic because he accused me, Brian of Apologetics 101, of not doing the research, and clearly Dr. Joel Duff did not do the research, because if he had done the research, he would be able to represent what Carl Werner actually argued for, as well as the evidence that was presented by Carl Werner. And he's not, Dr. Joel Duff is not acting as if he is knowledgeable about what Dr. Werner has argued in his book Living Fossils. And if Dr. Duff were to do a response video to this and says, "See here, I got his book on living fossils," and assuming it's not a recent purchase, following me saying all that, uh, I would be surprised. You know, so I would have to, throw it to his faulty memory. Maybe he hasn't seen the book in a while. Maybe he doesn't remember it. Maybe he doesn't bother looking at it. Maybe he didn't even bother reading it all. Whatever the case may be. But like I said, he's acting like somebody who is ignorant of Dr. Werner's position, especially what he originally argued in his book, Living Fossils. And if you're going to go and refute somebody, you better be aware of their material. And that is Dr. Werner's primary material, not his slides that he shows in his presentations. That's going to be based upon his investigation that is conveyed in this book. But his primary source, the primary source of material that he has out there on living fossils for people, as a resource for people to be able to get this information from, is going to be this book. Because when people quote from Carl Werner, they're not going to cite Carl Werner in Brian of Apologetic 101's video. They're not going to cite him from that. They're going to cite him from his book, Living Fossils, because that's his main text. That is the primary source that's the ultimate accumulation of his study and research in this manner. And that's what they're going to accept or cite. And so if you're going to go and try to refute Carl Werner, then you better get his book. You better know his arguments. You better be able to accurately present those arguments. Let's continue.
And then Carl Warner's claiming there are 10 things that are just like modern mammals. Like he's talking to Apologetics 101, and he's telling his audience, and then this is what Answers in Genesis is basing their speakers are using Carl Warner's language here, in which he describes them as modern mammals. Like,
did you just hear the straw man argument? Is that what Carl Werner said? No. This is why I turned your attention to it, right? He said that they were like modern versions of animals. He didn't say they were, okay? He didn't say they were as. He said they were like modern versions. That means they have similarities with the modern versions, which the evolutionists themselves are admitting to. So notice the change in language there. From Carl Werner saying it was like this to it was this. Is that what Carl said? Is that what Dr. Werner said? No. He said it was like modern mammals. That's what he said.
They found beavers. Now, you
Is that what he said? He didn't say he found beavers. He said he found beaver-like.
push Carl Warner, I'm sure he's going to say it wasn't exactly the same species of beaver day, but he would clearly he clearly thinks it's the same kind of organism, right?
Is that what he said? No. He said it's beaver-like. Beaver-like does not necessarily mean he thinks it's the same kind. He's saying the evolutionists themselves are saying this, okay? That they have similarities with the modern versions, and it's like. It could be the same kind of organism. It could be. It doesn't mean it is. We don't know. You can't do a side-by-side comparison if they won't let us do that, right? And you have to have a side-by-side comparison in order to argue from the similarities, right? So we don't know 100% if it's a beaver. It could be. There's a possibility it could be, or at least the same species as a beaver. That's possible. Doesn't mean it's the case. It's just possible. Okay, maybe it's that way. Maybe it's not. There's no way to know for sure. Okay, and Dr. Carl Werner said that. There's no way to know for sure. So let's continue.
in the parlance of young earth creationism, a kind being the beaver kind. There's no way that this organism is in the beaver kind. If he were...
Did anyone say anything like that? By the way, in the comment section, in the me and back and forth that me and Dr. Duff did, Dr. Duff kept bringing up created cons, and I was like, "Who's talking about created cons?" I said, "Carl Werner doesn't mention created cons. I didn't mention created cons. What's this got to do with created cons?" And he's like, "Well, you don't understand anything I argue." It's like, no, it's because you're being vague, and I don't understand what you're saying here. But created cons isn't even brought up, not by Dr. Werner, not by me. So who's talking about created cons exactly here? I mean, we talk about created cons in other contexts, in other places, and I believe in created cons strongly. I have an entire video just discussing I got other videos as well discussing created cons and discussing different things along that lines. And but here, nobody said that it's part of the same kind. It could be. I'm very open to the idea that this could be part of the beaver kind. Is it? Don't know. I don't know until we are able to do a side-by-side comparison. But nobody, as far as I can tell, has even brought up created kinds. But Dr. Joe Duff brought it up in the comments to me. He's bringing it up here. Who said anything about created cons exactly? I'm pretty sure Dr. Werner never said anything about created cons in our entire interview. I'll have to look it over to be sure 100%, but I don't remember him ever bringing up created cons. And he doesn't bring it up in this clip. I didn't bring it up in my discussion with Dr. Duff. Dr. Duff brought it up, and it's like, okay, who's talking about created cons here? Maybe he's getting that from Answers in Genesis speaker. I didn't actually watch that particular video, either the original or his response to the Answer in Genesis speaker. So I don't know if he is getting that from him or where he's getting that, or maybe he's just connecting the dots there because we do talk about created cons. I don't know. I honestly don't know where he's getting this information from. But as far as I know, Dr. Werner doesn't bring it up from created cons. He doesn't say it's a same created con. I think there's a possibility of it. I'm open to it, strongly open to it. I don't differ with that if it turns out to be that way. I'm not dogmatic one way or the other. It wouldn't matter to me if it turned out to be the same created con or just some other animal of a different kind that's similar to it. It really wouldn't matter to me on that, either way. But it's far more than what we would expect if evolution was true. That's why there's all these jaw-dropping moments for the evolutionists. But nobody's saying that it has to be the created kind. It could be. I'm very open to it being. I don't know. Maybe some creationists think it is. And it's very likely possible, the ability that it could be. I don't know. But either way, I am not dogmatic about it one way or the other, and nor have I argued that, nor have I heard Dr. Carl Werner argue that, nor him saying it in his book. As far as I can tell, he didn't bring it up in the interview. As far as I can remember, I don't remember him bringing it up in the interview. So I don't know where he's getting this thing with the created cons thing. We've not said that it is the same kind as a beaver. So it could be. I'm open to it. But we've not said that in a dogmatic fashion and said that it is the same created kind as a beaver. But he's bringing it up for some reason. Don't know. It's weird. So I don't know why he's bringing it up. He brought it up in the comment section as we were going back and forth too, and I never said anything about created kinds.
To really study the original literature, he would agree it's not the beaver kind. And I can tell you there are other young earth creationists, including those that Answers in Genesis, if they were consistent with their own literature, that have identified that particular fossil as being a member of the Dodecadonts. But the Dodecadonts are a group of mammals, kind of like saying monotremes or marsupials, a group of mammals completely extinct.
All right. kind of assuming the modern classification system. But anytime you bring up stuff like this, you need to source it. And he doesn't source it here. He brings it up in the comment section to me, as you saw in the first comment, as well as other comments, including the more recent ones that followed this video. But in no way does he ever source it. Not in the comment section, not in this video. And if you're going to say that about Answers in Genesis, a lot of critics, I've heard critics like Guts and Gibbon do it as well. And when I ask for sources, they don't provide it. Because I did ask her for a source from this, and nobody provided that source. So, and she didn't provide that source. A lot of people think that, I guess that it's a way of trying to bolster their authority of what they're saying on it. If maybe you'll believe a major answer or young Earth creationist organization like Answers in Genesis kind of thing. But Answers in Genesis have a lot of different speakers to speak there, for one thing, and they don't always represent the actual organization's position, especially if they're writing in ARJ, because ARJ is a peer-reviewed publication, and so many different people can come into it and try to get, or at least experts could try to get their positions there, but that does not represent the positions of ARJ, nor does it present the position of AIG at all. And so you can't argue that necessarily that everybody who's ever spoke or referenced something in Answers in Genesis website or in the publication, the peer review publication of Answers in Research Journal, Answers Research Journal, is in some way representative of Answers in Genesis, because it's not. So you have to be careful in the way you argue that. Now, a lot of the stuff that is coming out from the staff of Answers in Genesis would likely represent the position of Answers in Genesis more so than just any speaker that has some text in there. It could represent it, but not always. And sometimes even the speakers individually will have different views on things. That I've seen that happen as well. But any given case, the bottom line is that if Dr. Duff wants to argue that Answers in Genesis agrees with him, he needs to put a link down and source it. Flash it across the screen, put it in the description box of his video, pin it at the top of his comments, link it in the comments to me. There's a million different ways he could have sat there and referenced this, and he did not. He never referenced it at all. Now, whether that be the case or not, I don't know. I would love to. I might go to Answers in Genesis after filming this just to see if I can find anything. But he has not presented any source at all. He just assumed, I'm going to tell you the Answers in Genesis agree with it and move on, which is kind of odd because earlier he said Answers in Genesis didn't agree with him. So he's switching back and forth. And he's saying, oh, if they be consistent, what they said in their literature. First of all, just because someone says something in literature doesn't mean it's representative of the entire publication. In the case of ARJ, that's especially true because they are a peer-reviewed publication. Like, for example, Science could peer review a particular paper that comes into it. That Science is a secular peer review publication, and they could peer review a publication that comes into it, but the positions of that paper and the conclusions of that paper may or may not represent the publication called Science as a whole. It may not represent their actual views on it personally. They may even disagree with the paper, but that has nothing to do with peer review, right? Because you can disagree with someone even if they are publishing a peer review. So it does not necessarily mean that it's representative of the entire organization. And so you have to be careful trying to argue something like that. But in any given case, you need to be able to source it. Okay? So if he's going to argue that is the case, he needs to source his information.
And Answers in Genesis recognizes that as a family, as a kind, an extinct kind of mammal. So you can't call those modern mammals and say that they're like something that you would recognize.
Is that what he said? No. He said that they were like modern mammals. He didn't call them modern mammals. That is, again, another strawman argument, another misrepresentation. I wonder if Dr. Carl Werner really did keep up with all the strawman arguments he made and the 50 or so strawman arguments that he put in an email to me one day was indeed an accurate number. Because look how many strawman arguments we just caught him saying. We just caught him saying, again, you can't say these are modern mammals. Is that what Carl Werner said? No. He said they were like modern mammals. You heard what he said. They were like modern mammals. That's what he said.
Yeah, you know what I said Apologetics one should do this research, but let me do like the bare minimum for it.
All right. You see where he's using Wikipedia, right? Using Wikipedia to define these terms. And of course, he's assuming that the way in which it's being classified is correct. But also keep in mind, he is misrepresenting Carl Werner's position because Carl Werner is also just arguing that in case of Penomymus, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's the Tasmanian-like uh, um, uh, Tasmanian-like mammal, the one that ate the dinosaur. I think that's what it is. We'll see in a second, but I think that's the one that had a dinosaur in its belly. But in any given case, he says in reference to that Tasmanian-like, and I've told him about Wikipedia in the comment section. You can read the comments. I've explained this to him, and he just kind of brushed it aside. He never dealt with it. He just assumed that Wikipedia is he never outright said Wikipedia is an academic source or say that it is or think it's some kind of scientific source. He's never actually said that outright, but he treats Wikipedia like it's an academic source. Like all you gotta do is look at Wikipedia, as if I'm suddenly gonna be convinced if Wikipedia says something. That's essentially the way he's arguing there.
For him, all right, because I think it's going to make part of the point here. Here we have, let's just go to the Wikipedia page for Rapenomamus, which is the last fossil that Carl Werner mentioned, which he talked about being like a Tasmanian devil. Right? It says Tasmanian devils found with the dinosaurs. Here,
Didn't say Tasmanian devils. He said like a Tasmanian devil. You notice that shift, right? First he said like Tasmanian devil. That's correct. Then he made it look like Carl Werner said Tasmanian devils found with dinosaurs. Is that what Carl Werner said? No, he said Tasmanian like. I believe the Tasmanian like one. I think that might be one that he was not allowed to see the actual fossil and photograph it. And he talks about in his book, but I don't think that I think that that's one of the ones that he was not allowed to actually photograph and do a side by side comparison to. But the evolutionists themselves have identified it as Tasmanian like. It has certain characteristics similar to Tasmanian devil. Whether that makes it a Tasmanian devil or not, don't know. Possibly it might not be a Tasmanian devil. We don't know. But either way, they are claiming that it's Tasmanian devil like. And he said, "Oh, Tasmanian devil found with dinosaur fossil." Did Carl Werner say that? Again, no.
and he mentions this specific name. Right? So let's see, what does Wikipedia say about this? Well, Rapenomamus is a genus of opossum to badger-sized Gopaconodontids, right? Which is a type of mammal. Now notice that the name itself actually means reptile mammal.
That is a fallacy in logic. I can't remember the name of the fallacy. It's like nomina something. I can't remember the name of the fallacy, but it's basically a type of fallacy involving names, where you just kind of assume that what is it named has anything to do with what it is. How many fans of Jurassic Park do we have out there? Well, if you've seen Jurassic Park, you know Alan Grant was trying to liken the similarities between a velociraptor and that of a bird, right? And then he went on to the word raptor. He said even the word raptor means bird of prey. That's true, but does that make it mean it's related to a bird? No. That's a fallacy in logic, and he just made that fallacy.
Yeah, it's like because it has features that are similar to reptiles too, right? So, all right, was Carl Warner going to say that this is a reptile because it's described as reptile-like as well?
Again, he's misrepresenting Carl Warner's position. Carl Warner never said it was a Tasmanian devil. He said it was what the evolution said, Tasmanian devil-like. All right. So he's basically relying heavily on the modern classification system, Wikipedia, etc., etc., etc. I am going to fast forward this because I don't want to watch the rest of this. I've seen it multiple times. I got through most of what I mostly want you to be able to see. But I did get permission to do the whole video, but I probably ain't gonna be able to do the whole video because there's just gonna be more of the misrepresentations that he's making to Carl Werner's position, as we've seen. This is why I did the presentation first. So let's move ahead.
He's right. There's no giraffes. There's no hippos. There's no primates. There's no. I mean, you think about all your popular. There's no carnivores, meaning bears and dogs and
Bears are actually not carnivores; they're omnivores.
weasels and cats, right? No hyenas. There's no. I mean, you think of all your major groups. There's no ungulates. There's hundreds and hundreds of ungulates species, many different kinds of ungulates, hoofed animals, and there are thousands of species of extinct ungulates that are found in the fossil record, but none of them are found with dinosaurs.
So, are the argument that Carl Werner has said, and the argument that we said, and he says it in the interview with me, that our expectation, as a result of a global flood, is not to find all of the mammals in every layer. He said that explicitly. Okay. So I don't know. I think he is doing what is called confirmation bias. It's a type of it's not really a fallacy in logic per se. It's more like an error in judgment in decision making because what he's doing is he's simply instead of looking at what we have argued over in our paradigm, what is consistent with our paradigm, he has simply assumed his paradigm and say, look here, the reason we don't find that is because it's consistent with an evolutionary view of history, and it's also consistent with a flood view of history, because we actually have entire flood models that actually explain why there's a particular order in the fossil record. So we actually can account for that under the flood models. So he's just assuming his position, evolutionary position on that, and just ignoring the fact that it's actually consistent with our paradigm. In fact, I think it's more consistent with our paradigm because it would actually take into account why we find complex organisms in one of the lowest layers of the so-called geologic column, in the Cambrian, and why we find soft body creatures. So I think it's more consistent with our position, but he's not taking into the fact that it is consistent with our position. He's not taking that into account. And so that's called confirmation bias.
Why hasn't Carl Warner figured this out? Right? I can understand him being, misled by popular press articles, but then again, he's trying to claim he's like more than just a lay person who's just picking up newspaper articles and coming to conclusions, right? He went out and he's talked to experts and so forth.
He has. He wrote a whole book on it, of doing that very thing.
And yet he's come away with these incredible misconceptions about the fossil record. And
he had no misconceptions. None. so far, all that Joel Duff has done in this video is misrepresented Carl Werner. That's all he's done. He has not stated one actual position. Well, he might have stated a couple, but for the most part, he has not stated an actual position that Carl Werner holds to. That he is contradicting that.
Then it's been explained to him by many people how he's wrong. You'd think you wouldn't want to make a mistake, right? You wouldn't want to be speaking untruths. Shouldn't you want to go back to the literature and actually look at it yourself, the original papers? And
keep in mind, the whole reason he's saying all this, he's saying, hey, look at this. These people don't mention it, therefore it must not be true. Argument from silence. He wants us to make an argument of silence like he's doing. Secondly, he's saying, hey, look at the way these people are classifying these things. We need to take their classification and what they've chosen to classify it as true. Both those things we're not going to do because they're errors. We're not going to do that. And that's exactly what he's expecting us to do. He's expecting us to make the same mistake that he's making right now.
And ask yourself, maybe there's, maybe I'm not, maybe I was wrong about how I've been portraying this. Go ahead and say there's a beaver-like organism. Now, I have heard some young earth creationists say that. They'll say like a beaver-like organism has been found.
That's because that's what Carl Werner said.
But as I said in my previous
and that's also what the evolutionists are saying.
Video, anyone watching that, anyone in their audience, when they say beaver-like, you just think, well, they mean something just like a beaver.
No. Everybody knows that it says beaver-like. When I heard Carl Werner and I read the statement in his book, when he said beaver-like, when I read the sources on that, beaver-like, when I heard when Carl Werner himself has said that and was very explicit about it, it was no doubt that he said beaver-like. I didn't think he was talking about something else. Once I understood that that was one of the fossils that he could not do a side-by-side comparison to, then I knew exactly what beaver-like meant. And other young earth creationists do as well. The reason we say beaver-like, if we were saying that it was a beaver, if we were saying it was a beaver, we wouldn't just say it's beaver-like. We would say it's beaver. That's what we would say. When we look at a beaver, if we see a beaver today, making a dam or something like that near a creek, and do we say, hey, look, there's a beaver-like? We don't say that, do we? We say there's a beaver. So if we say met a beaver, we say beaver-like because that's what the evolutionists are agreeing with, that it is beaver-like. It has similarities to a beaver. Whether it is a beaver or not, we don't know because we're not allowed to do a side-by-side comparison of it. So in this video, Dr. Joel Duff has intentionally strawman Carl Werner. He is on purpose strawman him. He knows exactly the kind of language we use. He knows the exactly reference. He knows exactly what Carl Werner has said. He's admitted in this video to knowing what Carl Werner has actually said. And then he turns around and keeps reframing that as him saying or arguing that it's a beaver. Or in Tasmanian devil, for the Tasmanian devil-like animal. That's what he's arguing. That's what he said. Now, there's this old saying, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then what is a video recording worth? He did a whole video recording, and it's clearly he's lying about what he's saying that Carl Werner believes. Clearly he lied. Outright lied. It's on camera that he lied. All the while accusing Dr. Werner of lying. So ironic. And yet, that's not what was said. That's not what was said. He knows what we're actually saying. He knows that Carl Werner said beaver-like. He admitted it. He said it multiple times in this video. But at the same time, he's still trying to frame it like he's saying it's a beaver. even though he knows he didn't say that.
But this one thing wasn't like a beaver, really. You know, it's like in taxonomic sense, is nothing like a beaver. It's not
Beaver-like is just referring to similarities to a beaver, which Carl Werner has repeatedly said over and over again.
at all related to a beaver. And yet you leave the audience with that. I mean, certainly Apologetics 101 absolutely believe this guy.
Yeah, that it was beaver-like. And so far, he's been right.
Because I've had a comment exchange with him. And in that exchange, he basically says, Carl Werner, proved that there are mammals in the fossil record that are he used this word, exactly like mammal species or mammals alive today.
Is that what I said? No. What I said was it looked exactly like them, mammals. And again, I was referring to the comparison, like in the case of Nautilus, comparing it side by side comparison. So obviously, I'm not talking about ones that Carl Werner was not able to do a side by side comparison. I was referring to a actual side by side comparison that was done that look exactly like it. Now, even in that case, there could be some differences. But I said it looked exactly like it. I framed it specifically that way, look exactly like it. And I actually said that over and over and over again. Let me show you. All right, we're here, and I typed in, I actually have all of me and Dr. Duff's comments in a Word document here. I'm not going to save it for that reason. I've got, it's a Word document I use in case anytime I have to save a comment if I'm in a debate with someone in the comment section or something. And here, I got the word exactly like this typed in the find box. So I can show you, okay, you see me saying, look exactly like, look exactly, look exactly, look exactly, look exactly, look exactly, look exactly, look exactly. Uh, I'm saying look exactly like it, and I misspelled exactly for some reason here. Looks like I did. Look exactly like the animal. That's what I said. And I was referring to the side by side comparison. At the time, I was not aware that there was, or I didn't think about there being some animals that he could not do a side by side comparison to. And thus, he ended up having to go with what the evolutionists were claiming, and the evolutionists were claiming that it was like beaver like was beaver like, and that sort of thing. But I was referring to the side by side comparison when I said that, and even then I used the words look exactly like. Not that it was exactly like, but that it looked exactly like. So this was a straw man of me. And I actually told him we had a little bit of a back and forth following this video on my channel because I guess he didn't realize I had already replied back to him. So he replied back to me and I replied back to him. We had a couple exchanges and finally we agreed that it's pointless to keep going back and forth like this. So we end up stopping. Um, but that's the only thing we actually did agree on. But I told him when we were going back and forth, and he already made this video at that point, and I told him, I said, look exactly like. I didn't say it was exactly like. I said it looked exactly like. And I was referring to the side-by-side comparison ones, like the Nautilus, for example, that you compare it side by side, and it looks exactly like it. That's what I was referring to. Look exactly like it. And that means from a visible point of view, just someone looking, a third party looking at, you got a side by side comparison, you got a picture over here, you got the actual fossil over here, and the similarities are so striking, you would think either they were exact in some cases, or the brother and sister, somehow related. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are necessarily, but it does mean that they could be, that there's a possibility of it, but because of the similarities. But either way, we obviously they're not actually brother and sister, but you get the picture that there were similarities in that respect. Um, And so I said, look exactly like. I didn't say exactly like, were exactly like. There could be some similarities or differences in some of them. That's basically what I had said. I'm not going to go ahead and continue the rest of that. It's safe to say that that the vast majority, probably about 99.9% of his video, was a misrepresentation of either Dr. Carl Werner's positions or my own. And the 0.1% that wasn't like that, there wasn't a misrepresentation. Actually, it was probably far more than 1.1%, because he does intermingle those two arguments, the misrepresentation and the reclassification argument, and try to argue that since moderners reclassify this, must make it so. But you don't know that. You just basically relied on how they have chosen to group these. So, well, he says, well, why don't you just look at the literature? Well, why hasn't he showed any peer review papers on this? And by the way, I looked for Tasmanian Devil on peer review. I couldn't find nothing on peer review on Tasmanian like Devil, or not Tasmanian Devil, but Tasmanian Devil like the fossil that was found, the Reponemus. And he relied on a Wikipedia article, Wikipedia, because we know that's a scholarly source, right? Because we know that's a scientific thing. You know, it's better than peer review to some skeptics. But no, in reality, it's not. But it's not an academic source, and he relied heavily on Wikipedia as a result. So not only is he relying on classification, he's relying heavily on Wikipedia. It's like, wow. And he's telling me to look at the literature, and he's not looking at the literature. He's looking at Wikipedia. That's not a peer review article. That's not a peer review paper. It's not peer review at all. You could put anybody could put anything they want to. You don't even know who's writing it. So yeah. But anyway, I'm gonna end it here. This has been kind of longer than I anticipated. I'm gonna have a lot of editing to do. I've got a live interview this coming Friday. It's the very first live interview ever on this channel, and it's going to be with Jennifer Niza. And I've talked to her through email last week, and she's all set for it. So it's going to happen. Hopefully my internet works out okay. This will be the very first live interview ever done on this channel, because I've got lots of interviews on this channel, but this will be the first live one. So pray for me. Hopefully everything works out. Please join me there. It's going to be awesome. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to like the video. That helps. Give it a thumbs up. That helps the YouTube algorithm get this information out to more people. And also being watched for it. If I do find Denzel's video on Rumble, if he does present that video on Rumble and does a response to Dr. Joel Duff on his channel on Rumble, I plan on linking that in the description box below, perhaps even pinning it at the top of the comment section so that everybody can check out his video as well in his response to Dr. Joel Duff. That's all I have for you today. And this is Apologetics 101 telling you to stay in the know.